Welcome to KMET 1490 AM ABC News Radio and the Southern California Business Report with Yvette Walker, a show dedicated to highlighting successful Southern California businesses and the people behind them.
Welcome and thank you for joining Southern California Business Report on ABC News and Talks, KMET 1490 AM, 98.1 FM, and KMET TV. I'm Yvette Walker, live blasting our signal from the center of Southern California, serving a population of over 25 million. Get us crystal clear and on demand by downloading the free live streaming app on Google Play and the Apple App Store. As always, a huge shout out to the team, Mitch, Bill, and Sean. I love you guys. And to our special advisory committee, which can be found at www.scbrtalk.com/advisory committee. Look them up and learn about the amazing people doing the work in our region. Okay, everybody, today I have the distinct privilege to introduce Senator Mike Morrell, talking about his recently published book, The Road to Restoring the Family, Leaving an Inheritance to Our Children's Children. Inspired by Proverbs 13:22, Senator Morrell believes parents should bestow upon their children wise counsel to help them grow into good people and strengthen future families for generations to come. Having stronger families makes for a stronger nation, but it can be tricky to keep up that strength with heightened stress, anxiety, and negativity found in this present world. The road back to restoring the family is Morrell's message to his children, as well as to all other families out there, of important facts and advice that is sure to help spiritually, morally, financially, educationally, and responsibly. Thank you so much for being with us here today, Senator Morrell.
Well, Yvette, thank you. You stole my whole opening line and you did it better than me. So thank you.
Well, thank you. You know, we're going to have
that up very, very nicely. Thank you.
Well, that is just, the Cliff's Notes, the very brief synopsis, but we're going to dig into this book and your journey to authoring such an incredible, thought-provoking book that brings together the greatest minds of all time, basically. But let's start off with the first question I ask every one of my guests, which is, please talk about your journey in, becoming a businessman, a senator, and now an author. Just a brief preview in time of Senator Morrell and what inspired you to author this remarkable book.
Well, life is a series of steps that I think God opens doors, closes other doors. But I went to a seminar years ago on the 7 deadly sins. And the most deadliest, they thought, was slothfulness. That's not being physically lazy. It's being spiritual lazy, where a man or a woman never comes to a point where they ask, how do we get here on earth? And for what purpose am I here for? Because we need purpose in life. I think as men, in particular, as they get older, even if they've had successful lives financially, if they didn't have that purpose, many of them, there's a saying, live quiet lives of desperation, because they get to the end of life and it's like they accumulated things, but not necessarily things that are useful and purpose here on earth. And so that drove me. But they also said, you kind of want to dream your dreams big. We have a big God we serve, and maybe he won't deliver the things you're looking for, but at least map out sort of a strategy on what you'd like to see your life look like. And, if those things work out, fine. If the path is redirected, fine. And so I started thinking about that. And that opened a lot of doors, because I thought I would like to own my own business someday, because I remember setting a company sales record one time, and it wasn't appreciated for my company. They changed my commission package for a little bit smaller commission after I had set a company record, And so I thought, number one, I'm going to be my own boss. Only one who can fail me is going to be myself, right? And then the second thing too, I thought I'm going to need time someday to open maybe some ministries to help our community, because the verse that drove me, and you mentioned it earlier, was from Solomon: the duty of a father is to leave an inheritance to his children's children, not just financially, but mentally, spiritually, physically, emotionally, educationally, as well as defending freedom for our country. And so there's other things I wanted to do in the community. So I thought being self-employed, I'd be able to break away, hopefully if I made enough money, And then I thought, if these doors continue to open, someday I would like to run for politics. And so I was fortunate to eventually get in the state Senate. But the only way I could do that is I had to have your own business, because your employer is not going to let you take off for 10 months in campaign. So I was able to go in and work for 2 hours a day at my job. I had a lending company called Provident Home Loans, and a real estate company called Provident Home Realty. And so, I was able to reach that point where I would work 8 to 10 in the morning, then I'd go campaign for the rest of the day. And I did that for 10 months. I worked hard and opened the doors for me to get into the state Senate. And so I really believe in having a purpose in life, seeking out those things. Why am I here? I mean, because you want to be useful in life. You want to make sure your path's being directed. And in that way, when failures come and you run into roadblocks, they're there for a purpose to make you stronger. And then, you pray and you hope God gets you through those things. So there's a lot of challenges. Sometimes I think God has placed me in precarious positions, in some ways have left me hanging out there longer than what I had anticipated, but he always delivered, and so it's been kind of an exciting thing. And I didn't want to live just for a job. And that's the last thing I'll say, and cut this shorter. And I apologize for yapping on here, but I didn't want to get to the end of my life and say, I wish I could have done this, would have done this, or should have done this. So I tried to work in such a way. And I told my wife, we'll have bad days, we'll have bad weeks, we'll have bad months. But if I ever have bad years, I'm going to switch professions, because I'm not going to live my life that way. And we did have bad days, bad weeks, bad months. But fortunately, I never had a bad year. So I felt like my path was being directed. And that means a lot to me. And it's helped me have what I feel is a useful life and a life with purpose. And you always have regrets, but I have few regrets.
Absolutely. And you hit the nail on the head with something you just said. It's something I tell my kids all the time. And that is, the last thing you ever want to say is shoulda, coulda, woulda. You do your best. You leave it all on the field and you put it in God's hands. So we are talking the same language. Thank you so much for that, Senator Morrell. So let's go back and talk about your first experience in business and finance and real estate, and how that served as a stepping stone to your next progression in politics.
Well, I needed money to open my own business, right? And so again, Providence works in mysterious ways. So I was saving money, and I would buy a couple of desks, put them in the garage, buy a couple of chairs, put them in the garage, because I didn't want to have any debt. But I was not accumulating the money as quick as I could from the sales that I had. It was a slow process. So I decided to go out and look to try to buy a home, something that was in foreclosure, and turn it and make the money so I could move on a little bit quickly. And so, I did give it some prayer. So I started looking at homes. I remember one Saturday morning, I walked up, knocked on a door of a man, and he opened it and he said, "Come in." And I said, I know I'd like to give you guys some money if you want to move. I'd like to buy your home. And he goes, "Well, we're have some tough times." And he said, "Sure, I'll sell it to you." I mean, it was just that easy. And I said, "Why so easy?" And he said, "My wife and I have had over 300 people knock on our doors on this door in the last month. And we knew we needed to sell, because we're getting towards the end. And if we don't sell, we're going to lose everything. But at least with you, we'll come out with some money." And he said, "My wife, when we got up this morning, she says, keep looking through the peephole. And when you see somebody you think you like and trust, open the door for that man, and we're going to sell it to him." So, I just knocked on the door after 300 people had been before me. And we negotiated a nice deal. I treated him fair. He treated me fair. House needed to be rehabbed a little bit. I rehabbed it, turned it in 3 weeks, and I had my money to open my business. So that was just a great inspiration for me to, take risks and try. And so I opened my business, and I got real fortunate. The first month, I was just, treated my customers well at my last job. And in this new job, they all came over, and I didn't lose a step or a heartbeat. Everything was streamlined and smooth. And so I like to plan that way. And again, I opened without any debt, because and with money in the bank, because I didn't want to be working on a shoestring. I felt like that would be wise planning.
Absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
that is a very textbook, well done economically, right? It was strategic, it was frugal, and you were able to capitalize on, that opportunity.
Yeah.
Brilliant, and congratulations to
Well,
you.
one other thing too, which really set me into motion. Um, um, they say in a multitude of counselors, there's victory, right? So the smarter people you have around you, the better. So I tried to surround myself and would always ask questions of people in the business who were more successful than me. But I did hire a consultant, and he had consulted with companies that were $100 million companies, $500 million companies, and he was expensive. But I thought, I'm going to pay him at least for 3 months and see if I can learn something in those 3 months from him. And he just shot me to the moon. I mean, he had a lot of wisdom. He asked the right questions. He was a seasoned veteran in consulting, and it was good because in a multitude of counselors, there's victory. And within about 3 years, he took my business to another level, which was beyond anything I ever thought I could accomplish, which really positioned me to be able to run for politics someday because I was able to work. There's something, the man who was a successful CEO, Jack Welch, who used to be the CEO of General Electric, said that if he understood the key leading indicators, the 3 or 4 key leading indicators of any company, he believed he could run that company from a desert island, which is a pretty big claim. But then again, it was Jack Welch, who was pretty big time at one time, right? And so, we worked through what key leading indicators are. I developed those things. And I was able to run my business by just working a couple hours a day. And then I was able to run it just up in Sacramento for about 4 years. An hour a day, I would check in with my office. And so, I had those core principles and those key leading indicators set up. So you knew what your business was doing, and you knew when the measurements were doing bad, you knew what buttons to push to make that go up. So a lot of it's education and getting the right counsel. That really that's something I really believe in. Iron sharpens iron, right?
Exactly. That is exactly what I was about to say. Iron sharpens iron, and you want to have that iron around you to be as sharp as possible. So, Senator Morrell, with that said, please talk about some of the greatest challenges that you experienced during your time in the private sector. I mean, it sounds like you had a lot of great victories and everything was very streamlined, but the reality is, when you are in business, there are challenges. Please talk a little bit about those.
Well, so I opened my business in '94, and about 3 months after I opened my business, we ran into a recession, and so business really went down. That was the first thing that happened when I opened my business. But going back to '82, I was working at another company, and that was one of the worst recessions. Interest rates were 18, 19% on homes. Today they're 7%. People are complaining. They were 18% back then, so you can imagine. So I had a little preparation by going through the early 80s. So when I opened my business going through this recession, it was a lot milder in '82. But again, in '82, it was almost impossible to get business, but I did. I got a lot of business. I just had to work a few more hours, and then I strategically targeted people on who, researched what interest rates they had. Could we get them a second, that sort of thing. So it was a little bit of research, a little bit of hard work, a few more hours, but I survived. But I came out of there with a bigger customer base, and then my business really thrived, which again forced me over to the lending business. And then with the recession, I think it was in '94. I'm not a seasoned veteran, but I already been through one recession, so I knew how to handle this a little bit. You got to, watch your costs. You got to cut your costs, and you got to be strategic and intentional, and making sure I always had a plan to market every single day. You never start. A lot of companies cut out their marketing budgets and their advertising budgets. That's the worst thing to do when business gets slow. There's other places you can cut. You don't take money, you don't eat food. You go without food if you have to, but you don't want to cut your marketing budget. So every day, my gal at work who did my marketing knew exactly what we were going to mail out, what we were going to email out, how many people we're going to send to. And we just kept that up and up and up. And so what happens, there was a curve I noticed, and this has been through 3 or 4 recessions I've been in. Your business is this big, but then recession shrinks your business to this big or this small, I mean, right? So it's gone, customer base has gone from this to this. Well, what happens is your competition was this way, but within the first 3 months, your guys didn't save any money, your business shrinks. Then another 3 months, those people get out. And then 3 months later, now you're in a 9 months, that pie or your competition is the same size as the number of business out there. So if you can survive those 9 months, at least in other recessions, what happens though business slows up, you've got 75% of your competition will die off and close their offices. So you got to really gut it out for those first 9 months. And then after that, business sort of just comes back. And so that's why, you want to try to go low debt and you want to have some money in the bank to weather those storms. But you got to be prudent. You got to cut the cost. You can't be afraid to cut the cost. And then, you put in a few more hours and you pray a lot harder too. You run a lot faster and jump a lot higher. And those are things that will help. And so far out of all those recessions, we've always come out of them. We've always gotten through them by making a profit. Sometimes it wasn't very much, but we didn't lose money. But we came out of them stronger. And, whatever doesn't kill you, they say makes you stronger. I don't know if that's true, but these things were pretty tough to get through. And each time I came out just slightly wiser and a little bit better, a little bit more resilient. And you want to thank God even during those tough times for teaching you. If I'm going to go through these tough times, God, teach me. Make me a better person on that. And so those were gifts. Those recessions, taught me a lot.
Absolutely. I think I mentioned this with last week's guest talking about, a calm sea doesn't make a skillful sailor. A skillful sailor is created through these torments, through these challenges, and through these opportunities to learn and develop that skill to weather even stronger storms in the future. So you're absolutely right.
Real quick, and a good sailor should be able to sail in any kind of a sea.
That's
just
right.
Like you're saying, calm storms. So that's a great analogy. I'm going to use that, what you just said, when people ask me that question again.
Yes, I love it because that's very conducive to life, right? The stormy seas of life, they come and they go, but it's how you weather them and what you learn from those opportunities that gives you the strength and the resilience to move forward and face future storms and challenges. So absolutely. But, earlier in the conversation, you mentioned having gone to a seminar where the topic was discussing some of the 7 deadly sins in relation to business and maybe viewing it from a business standpoint. Please talk a bit about that and how that influenced you in your journey in business.
Yeah, it was really it was actually a 3-day course, and we actually talked about it all 3 days. Like, you have pride, which is one of the deadly sins. And the great thinkers in classical education and Christianity thought that pride may be the deadliest of the sins. And then another half thought it was slothfulness. I think pride is right up there. But I think when you don't take time to think about life and how I got here, how did I get created, and where am I going? I think that's a faulty thing. We have to really give careful thought to why we're here and what are our gifts. We may think we want to be a movie actor or something, but you got to really discover where your gifts are and where your talent is. But some of the other sins, I was happy to learn that gluttony did not mean you ate too much. It meant a person who has an insatiable appetite for the materialistic goods of the world, meaning, I got to have the next car, new car, next stereo, the next toy to satisfy that thing in me. So you can eat up here during Christmas is what I'm saying. But that was another one. And again, avarice, wanting too much of the world's things. And then pride, I think, again, is one of the most deadliest sins. And then, so anyway, the goal, according to Thomas Aquinas and Augustine, is we want to try to get eliminate or reduce those 7 deadly sins out of our life and replace them with virtues. And I have a chapter in my book on virtues. And the reason why is, Christ talked about that on the Sermon on the Mount. He gave some virtues that, you want to be a righteous person. You want to have mercy. Scripture also talks about you want to be a person of justice. How do you intertwine those with being a man of justice. If you're strictly a man of justice, you can be a cruel leader. If you're strictly a man of mercy, you might be a little bit wimpy. And so the Greeks tried to figure out, how do you reconcile those two? Well, in the book of Micah, the answer is given. It says, is to do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly with your God. And so humility is a great way to instill virtues in your life. And again, the two most important for a politician, I've heard, is justice and mercy. You have to know and have the right amount of humility so you know how to exercise those things. And then also, going back, then the Greeks said to be the magnanimous man, you had to work to get as many virtues in your life as possible. And, there's many that we can talk about today. But one of the things I've heard from different people that politicians need is prudence. And I like that word. Prudence means a politician should have wisdom, but he should exercise it in an excellent timing. Because you could have something really wisdom to say, but the timing in politics could be off, like maybe you shouldn't let your son play on the freeway, maybe it's not a good time to tell him that, so you want to exercise your speech with caution, but you really want to make sure when you deliver that message, it's timely. And so I love studying about the virtues, because I think the more virtues we try to instill in our life, those other sins, covetousness and those types of things will slowly disappear in our life. Never get purpose. None of us ever arrive, but we can get better. And as we get better, and that was the purpose of the book, kids, as well as, I wrote this for my grandkids, more things are taught than caught. And so that's why we as fathers have to instill these things in our life, because when we play them out in our lives, our kids will see those things. And, a lot of things that I picked up from my dad, before I became a Christian, he was a little wild one and did some things he shouldn't have done. And I kind of followed in his footsteps and got in a lot of trouble when I was younger, but then through faith, I've been working on that, trying to get better every day. And it's not easy, I'll tell you that, but it sure makes your life a lot better. And, it makes not only us better, but being a better man helps me to be a better father and a better husband. And especially, I wrote this book it's a very timely book about restoring the family. And one of the chapters is on marriage. Why stay married? I put medical information there that I got, that a man who gets married once and stays married lives longer than a man who gets divorced. Amazing to me, And one of the 4 ways to get ahead financially is stay out of debt. That makes sense. Get a job and keep a job. Get continuing education. But I love this. Get married and stay married once, and you'll more than likely come out better than your partners or your friends. But here's another thing why the family needs to stay together. I just talked with at a church recently, and the assistant pastor works at a detention center with these young men, these prisoners. And in his detention center, he said 94% of those young men come from fatherless homes. Fatherless homes. Then I learned that the majority of these young, beautiful prostitutes usually get involved with prostitution because they have daddy issues, you see. And so a father and a mother are the two that God's put together when, and those kids, our kids, they don't see two people. Just like when you're getting married, it says the two shall become one. That's how kids see their dad and their mom as one unit. And when that unit split, it's going to play all kind of havoc. And then when your young kids get in teenager years, they're going to play you against your wife and your wife against your husband. And then when another person or a spouse comes into that family, they're going to want to rebel because they're not going to like that spouse, the new spouse, because they're replacing dad and mom. So, I mean, we create a lot of havoc for ourselves. And in America today, such a high divorce rate. And kids that do come from high divorce rates, the suicide rates are higher, the drug rates are higher. And it just wreaks havoc in all of our lives. So you mentioned it earlier, a strong, stable family will make for a strong America. Let me quote former slave Frederick Douglass. I love his quote. He said that it's easier to build strong men than it is to have to repair broken men. I
That
think
is
that's the quote.
absolutely true.
Yeah.
Absolutely true. And so, when you talk about those quickly, what are some strategies that you have used to avoid those sins and replace them with those gifts?
Well, I think, prayer, iron sharpens iron. I've always had good friends to hang around with, go to lunch, kind of bare our souls, people I've known 30, 40 years. I've had a friend of mine in my life named Tom France. He was older than me, but man, he raised his boys right. Plus, he was in business. He had a great wife. And so when it came to raising kids or on issues of business, I would call him. He went to my church. Tom, I need your help, man. I got a problem here with my daughter. She's turning into a teen. What do I do? And he just had a lot of common sense. He had 5 kids, I believe, and they all seem to do very well. And so I think seeking counsel, again, praying, going to church, being an example to your kids, and then also I think you want to also build value into your life with your wife, because you want to make sure that your kids see you as a united front.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And on that note, Senator, I'm so sorry, but we have to go on break. So we'll catch up on that thought when we come back. All right, Yvette Walker with ABC News and Talks, Southern California Business Report, here today with Senator Mike Morrell, talking about his recently published book, The Road to Restoring the Family, Leaving an Inheritance to Our Children's Children, inspired by Proverbs 13:22. Senator Morrell believes parents should bestow upon their children wise counsel to help them grow into good people and strengthen future families for generations to come, believing that having stronger families makes for a stronger nation. When we return.
Hi, Ray Lance from the Diamond Center in the Claremont Village here. One of the coolest parts of a third-generation family business is getting to know the families we serve through generations. Once you experience our friendly service, our fair and transparent pricing, and our beautiful jewelry that we make to last a lifetime, you'll stick with us too. Come visit us in the Claremont Village or at Lantz, L-A-N-T-Z, diamondcenter.com and see what makes us different.
Hi, I'm Dana Rademacher with MGR Property Management.
A lot of people wonder about the value that property management has for their property. Property management can include all property types, including residential, commercial, and HOA. It is valuable because property managers are experienced in what can happen at your property. We're aware of liabilities. We're able to do predictive and preventative maintenance. We know what is coming up with the changes in the weather, the seasons, how old certain aspects or different capital projects at your property are. We're able to best negotiate contract pricing, legalities with your tenants, and anything else that you may need to ensure that you're getting the full value of your property.
If you're interested in speaking with the representative at MGR Property Management regarding your property management needs, you can visit our website at mgrrealestate.com, or you can call our number at area code 909-581-6600 to be connected with the representative.
Ontario International Airport is on to a better way to fly with over 65 daily nonstop flights to more than 20 major destinations and the easiest airport experience in Southern California. Visit flyonto.com/Ontario to learn more about Ontario International Airport today. The University of La Verne is rated first in California for alumni satisfaction. Learn more about accelerated programs offered online and on campus in La Verne, Irvine, Ontario, Burbank, or College of the Canyons. Visit go.laverne.edu. The University of La Verne. go.laverne.edu.
Hi, I'm San Bernardino County Sheriff Shannon Dykes. If you're looking to start an exciting career in law enforcement and make a difference in your community, we are hiring dispatchers, nurses, deputies, laterals, and many more. For a complete list of our jobs and more information, visit sheriffsjobs.com.
Cal State San Bernardino is home to the only school of entrepreneurship in California. With globally ranked degree programs, you can start your journey today to become a successful entrepreneur. Learn more and connect at entre.csusb.edu.
Welcome back, everyone. Yvette Walker with ABC News and Talk Southern California Business Report here today with Senator Mike Morrell talking about his recently published book, The Road to Restoring the Family, Leaving an Inheritance to Our Children's Children, inspired by Proverbs 13:22. Senator Morrell believes parents should bestow upon their children wise counsel to help them grow into good people and strengthen future families for generations to come, believing that having stronger families makes for a stronger nation. Thank you again for being with us today, Senator Morrell.
Thank you for having me, Yvette.
Perfect. So prior to the break, we were kind of going over the 7 deadly sins, the gifts of the Spirit, and how you personally were able to overcome a lot of those challenges in your professional and political life. Please share how these values served you in your time as senators. You know, when you're talking about your conscience and your constituents while defending freedom, talk about that balance and how you were able to navigate that.
Yeah, I kind of stated earlier, I thought about life, and same thing in politics. I knew I was only going to be there for a period of time because there's term limits. And so I ended up winning, I think, 4 elections, so I stayed in there longer. But I could have gotten out after the first election, could have lost. So I didn't want any regrets to be able to look back and say, I wish I could have done this, should have done this, or would have done this. So I kind of went all out. And so the first core principle was a scripture would help me because, look, I get weak knees. You got lobbyists hitting you from this side. You got your fellow Republicans hitting you from this side. Then you got your constituents hitting you from another side. And so I learned that the fear of man casts a snare. And so I did place my trust in God, said, I'm not going to fear man, even though sometimes I did. But and I didn't want to have any regrets. That's number one. Number two, the Declaration of Independence, second paragraph, says we hold these truths to be self-evident. How do we find truth? First paragraph says, according to the laws of nature, and nature is God, meaning God puts in the human nature and history, the moral, the divine law, right? And so that it's written on every person's heart and their mind. That way they're without an excuse. They know right from wrong. He's put that in there. A criminal never stays at a crime after he robs a bank. He runs out of there, gets in the car, and drives away fast. Somebody who murders never stands, calls the police and said, hey, I just killed. They always run. That's human nature, right? When our kids would play in sports and one of our boys would get hurt, I maybe this sounds stupid. I would say, way to take the hit, get up and take no pain, and my wife would want to run out in the football field and console him, and so there's a difference, and thank God they had their mother there to console him, right? I don't know if my advice was that good. But anyway, those are the laws of nature. Nature's God. So they're put there, and the Constitution rests upon that. That's how we're to make decisions based on self-evident truth, right? And they're put there by, again, God, what we would say. And so when it came to those kinds of things on how to vote, I tried to go with my constituents as much as possible. But a democracy is the will of the people. It's important to remember that. But we're a republic, and a republic goes one step more than a democracy. A republic protects the minority interests equally as the majority. And this is an important point to realize. Abraham Lincoln, during his time for running for president, the majority, public opinion, if they had polls back there, the polls would have showed that they were tired of Lincoln talking about ending slavery. The majority of the country was still that slavery was okay. And he wrote a letter that we cannot cave in the popular sovereignty. I love it. He just says, the tug has to come better now than any time after, meaning we have to stand our ground. We have to protect the minority's interests equally as majority. That's what a republic is. And so I always remember that. And Sir Winston Churchill did the same thing when he had read the book by Hitler's book, Mein Kampf, in the 1930s. He knew what Hitler's plan was. And of course, he talked about that. And the British people booted him from Parliament. The new guy who came in, Chamberlain, would sign peace treaties, which British people liked because they had come out of World War I. They didn't want World War II. But eventually Hitler reneges on Great Britain. Now they're on their way to Great Britain. And guess who the British people call in to redraft them in? Was Sir Winston Churchill. So what I've learned is in being a politician, your greatest politicians or statesmen will separate them from a politician. They're always willing to take on the most difficult issues to protect over the minority's interests equal as majority. And they don't go by popular opinion. They go by what's right. And so those are things that when it came to me, I have a conscience, right? But I had constituents. And so I always tried to go with my constituents, unless if I knew my conscience, according to those self-evident truths, were contrary to that. Then I had to lean towards the wisdom contained in our United States Constitution and our Declaration of Independence. There are self-evident truths, and so I'd have to follow that. And if I was not sure on which way to go, you can look at history at some of the greatest minds and see what their thoughts were. You look to the Greeks when it came to politics and saw how Aristotle, Plato, Socrates, Marcus Aurelius, or any of those guys govern and what they have to say. If you look on the spiritual side, you go and you can stand on the shoulders of Thomas Aquinas or St. Augustine, as well as the scriptures. And so there's answers there if we take time to study those things. So that's how I navigated my way through. And I kept winning elections because I think when I did talk about these things, I was never disrespectful. I tried to take a page out of Ronald Reagan's playbook, and I tried to always do it with a smile, a little bit of a joke, though I was very serious about the subject. And I never ranked on people or said disparaging remarks about them. And so it kept me in office, and I won my races in very difficult races, and I usually won by a lot of votes. And so I think that was good. And I think people understood I was trying to do the right thing, and I did not shy away. I always had an answer to be able to explain to my constituents, this is why I voted this way. And in most cases, most of them bought in that it was common sense.
Absolutely. And so I can't believe this hasn't been done before, but in your book, you basically superimpose the greatest minds of all time, many that were hundreds of years before Christ, agnostic, but always coming back to those self-evident truths that, as you said, were spoken about in Proverbs. Please talk about some of those minds and those concepts and philosophies that you brought into play with your book, The Road to Restoring the Family.
Yeah, well, when we talked about politics, you had these great minds. Augustine, for an example, I understood he used to have 4 scribes. And so he would talk to this scribe, write this down, right, on marriage. Then he'd go to another subject, write this down. He'd walk back and forth. And he would do this all day, 6 days a week, right, giving thoughts. So he was obviously a genius. And so, you want to get his opinion. And Aristotle, Plato, Socrates, Plato, remember, this is awesome. Plato talked about spiritual things. I just reversed them. Augustine or Aquinas talked about politics or moral issues. And Plato, from my understanding, he lived in this time of, multi-gods, right? Monotheism. And so there was 300 or 400 gods. And he came through and just said, I don't know if there can be 300 gods. Let me reason why. And through this long speech, he identifies that there can only be one God. But the only way we could know is if that man was to die, go to that place that no man's ever come back from, come back and tell us what was there. And so here he is 300 or 400 years before the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. But he says, if there's ever a man who can do that, that would be God, right? And so I think we can gain a lot by standing on the shoulders of people that possess a superior wisdom than ourselves. So I figured, I'm not the dumbest guy, but I'm surely not the smartest guy, right? And so I wanted to stand on those shoulders of all those Greek philosophers, as well as the one in Christianity. And then I've got a chapter on finances, and I stand on the shoulders, as I said earlier, Jack Welch, the man who wrote 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, Stephen Covey. And so I tried to glean off of their wisdom, people who've spent hours and days and months and time and years trying to perfect their profession in these things. And then, you have that. And then I do check things with scriptures. And I like Proverbs because Solomon was considered the man who had the most wisdom during his time and perhaps any other time. And there's 31 chapters of Proverbs in that book of Proverbs. And it takes maybe 3 minutes to read each of those chapters. And he made it the book of wisdom, it's called. And so there's 31 chapters, and there's typically 31 days in a month. So if today's the 19th, I would get up and read Proverbs chapter 19, and it's got advice on marriage. It has over, all of Proverbs has over 100 verses on how to make money. He who works with a diligent hand will prosper, and a multitude of counselors are victory. Don't co-sign for people. That's in there. If you do, surely they'll take your bed, it says, the lender will. And then it's got marriage, how to have a successful marriage, how to raise your kids. And also it identifies what a foolish person and how they will act. And so you're to avoid the fool. And then here's what a wise person looks like. And you want to make sure you work hard to make those people your friends. So it's the book of wisdom, and it's practical wisdom. It's stuff that, as I've gone to these seminars in my early days, these business seminars on how to make money, so many of these people, they don't quote Proverbs, but they're using the same principles from Proverbs. You can tell they've read Proverbs, and they integrate those things into their speech. So again, it's the book of wisdom, and I challenge all your readers, you should read a chapter a day and do that. Some say for the rest of your life. I did it for 2 years, pretty much straight. And I kind of let that go for the last 10 or 15 years, and I just started it up again. And it's amazing. You can read those things and you pick up on stuff all the time. But again, remember what that is. It's God's mind and his thoughts and his words that he wants to impart to humanity. And so we can learn something, how to raise our kids, how to have a good marriage, that sort of thing. So it's good. It's good wisdom, good for the soul, and good for us mentally, spiritually, physically, emotionally, as well as financially.
Absolutely. So, Senator Morrell, please talk about those concepts and perspectives the reader, your reader, will hold to be truthful and self-evident. And how does the abolition, in your words, of education come into play with this information that you were able to compile and put into one master book?
Well, C.S. Lewis has a good quote, and I'm going by recalling right now in his book. I believe it was the Screwtape Letters. It's a fictional story which contains a lot of truth. So you have a demon called Screwtape and his nephew called Wormwood, and he's given advice to his nephew that this young boy over here, your job is to destroy his life. But remember, ever since he's been a youth, he has had a dozen incompatible philosophies dancing about in his head. A dozen incompatible philosophies dancing about in his head. What he means is whoever controls what goes into the head controls what goes into the soul. Whoever controls the soul controls that young man or woman's eternal destiny, meaning either heaven or hell. And so Screwtape's job is to teach Wormwood, his nephew, how to destroy this young man's mind, his soul, and eventually his resting place for eternity. And so, I think on education, you can send your kids to any school you want as long as they're not teaching a dozen incompatible philosophies. They have to be teaching truth. And so in our day and age, first of all, I like in Arizona, our daughter lives in Arizona, and they have a new law that the money follows the student. And so you can spend up to $7,500 a year and send your kid. You can homeschool them. You can send them to a private school, a charter school, or public school. Now, the Board of Education in Arizona over here doesn't like that, but I believe in competition, free market, right? You're a better athlete if you hang around better athletes. They're going to sharpen you. You're going to get better. If you want to go into business, you better hang around sharp business people because they're going to sharpen you. And I think what happens, competition floats all boats. We all get better. So I think this is healthy for the public schools because they are so far behind. In so many ways, America once used to be number one in America in education. And in some of our subjects, we're sliding into third world nation status, like math and science and other things. We're the greatest country on earth. We should be number one in education, but we've slid so far. And part of that's because we have too much government. It's controlled in Washington, D.C., a one size fit all. It should be at the local municipalities. And I like that the money should follow the child. And then the parents who love the child, let them make a decision on where they want to send their kids and then see if it produces results. And these homeschooling scores, from what I understand, these kids are scoring much higher than people in public schools, as are the charter schools and are the Christian schools. So what what my reasoning behind there is we don't want to leave any children behind. So I'm hoping this raises the public schools where they're going to have to get their act together and work a lot harder, and wish more states like California would jump on that bandwagon. But it's not about the kids. It's about the unions who want to control things and control the money. And so the founders warned us about big government and be leery of that. So that's one thing. We the people, and I've got a chapter in here on defending freedom, why we have to be actively engaged in exercising our civic responsibility and reducing government, because government was meant to work for us, not against us. And those politicians are to be there to be our servant, not our masters. And we're allowing them, we the people are allowing them to become our masters. They're telling us what to do. We've got to tell them what to do. As Ronald Reagan said, get out of my pocket and quit talking in my ear, And so we have to restore those things to make our schools better, because we want to compete in a global economy. We want our kids to be well off financially as well as mentally and spiritually. And so I think parents do know better than school boards. Parents do know better than government. Parents do know better than teachers. So I think we should take a chance on the parents who have a vested interest, and we should do more of this, allowing the money to follow the student, and our education system will get better. But if not, it's going to continue to go down a bad path. And we don't want that to happen, because that just leads to poverty and more government welfare, which means you got to raise taxes to take care of people. And people, you can't be happy living off the government. We're designed to be creative and grow, and God's given us opportunities to make money and to grow spiritually and in many ways, as long as we do what's right and proper in educating our kids. And so we are in a lot of trouble in America, but this is one of the key things we have to get right.
Absolutely. You're absolutely right, Senator Morrell. And, in your comment, you mentioned, yes, politicians are there to be public servants, right? We elect you. You are there to serve us. So let's talk about the things that lead us to lose our life to gain life, in a conversation we had in relation to spirituality, the gifts of the Spirit, and our purpose in life.
Yeah, this is just an observation. I'm not a psychiatrist, but I have observed a lot of things. And it seems like the unhappiest people that I meet are people that are always trying to get things for themselves. It's all about self-centered, self-absorbed, and selfish. Yeah. And in politics, where they're trying to win elections, it's not to serve the people. It's try to, raise their ego that they won something, and, they'll do anything to get to the top. Those people, trust me, they are not happy, and I've even seen it at a smaller scale where I've had people work for me over the years. We have relatives too that we've seen that they're sort of, they're very centered on their self. And I can think of one particular relative is so centered upon themselves, where all they think about is themselves, right? And it seems like the more they do that, the worse they get, in their emotional state of life. They just bring more problems into the world and more chaos and more confusion into their families. And so one of the things the scriptures tell us, and I love this because it makes some sense. If we want to save our life, we have to lose it, right? And if we want to, anyway.
So what does it mean to lose it? It means to give the gifts that have been bestowed upon us freely for the benefit of others. And that's really where we gain our purpose. So we're coming up short on time, Senator Morrell, but I'm really happy. Please talk about this book, because when I invited you to come on, I thought this would be the perfect Christmas gift. I'm not a huge on material things, but when it comes to books and knowledge and direction and guidance, to me, this is something that is absolutely invaluable. I would love to see this under everyone's Christmas tree as the guide for a family, just the how-to book, right? To restoring the family, how to make it strong and how to create a solid foundation. What say you?
Yeah, I took a long time to write it because I wanted to get it right. I originally started where I was just going to write letters to my children and then my grandchildren, right? And so Joni and I were looking at those, and it had been a few years since I worked on them because I ended up in the Senate. And so we were looking in the storage shed in the file cabinets, and she saw those and said, you ought to turn this into a book for two reasons. Number one, you've got enough here for a book. But number two, our kids and our grandkids are going to be raised with all these other millions of kids, right? If we can have some kind of way to benefit them, that would be good. And so I think right now, the world, people think they believe it's coming apart at the seam, right? A lot of churches believe we're coming to the end. That I don't know if that's accurate or not, but there's a lot of despair out there. There's a lot of angst out there. And so it's a timely book because when we are having problems, right? And we are going through tough times. And by the way, I believe America is going to prevail, but I think we're going to have some challenging times we have to go through to get to the other side, right? So in the meantime, what's the most valuable thing to us while we're here on earth, right? And that's our family. And so that's why the message that's timely, where we got to bring families back together. Fathers got to be fathers. Moms got to be moms. Fathers have to take care of the kids, and the mom father needs to love each other. And so it's just practical advice on foundational issues, the most important issues in life, on morality and marriage and education, to lay that foundation so our kids and our grandkids will prosper and their lives will be enriched during very difficult times, where they can, we can put, increase their percentages that they'll thrive through a very difficult culture that we're in today. And so that's why I wrote it. And the good news is it is selling. But what I really like are people probably 50 years old. Well, I like anybody who buys my book, but the people between 50 and older, every single speech that I've given, there's always those people are buying multiple books between
Very
2 and
quickly.
10.
Perfect.
Between 2
Thank
and 10
you so
books
much.
because they want their grandkids to grow up like they did. That's why they're buying that book.
Quickly, Senator Morrell, where can the audience buy your book? Quickly.
Yeah, Amazon.com, and it's The Road to Restoring the Family. Amazon.com, The Road to Restoring the Family.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for being with us today, Senator Morrell.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be on, and you're a good interviewer. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Senator. All right, everybody listening, don't forget to find us on Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, and Instagram. Check us out on scbrtalk.com. Don't miss my interview with Sheila Cavalier, CEO and founder of Freaky Cookie, who set out to create something fun, something unique for the corporate gifting world that would communicate to customers and employees just how much they mattered. Next week, we will have Amy Scruggs, who has been known in the country music industry for more than 15 years and has opened for many artists, including Clint Black, Trace Adkins, Charlie Daniels, Phil Vassar, Little Texas, and many more. She was the spokesperson for the Americans Veterans of California, performing at a veteran and military events throughout the state. Avi's live show is with her band, The Ghostwriters, which is led by her talented son, Ryan Scruggs, who has performed and toured by her side as lead guitar since he was 18. You do not want to miss it. We will see you all next week.